So I just returned from Senegal this morning. It's one of those trips that we continue to make whenever there's an opportunity. And the reason why we do these trips is essentially because we know that the world is interconnected, and that if like we say, like Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and likewise a threat to democracy in Uganda. We regard it as a threat to democracy and these values which we believe in everywhere. So we believe in building networks, synergies all across. So that's why we normally, travel every once in a while to meet compatriots in other places, whether be it on the African continent, in Europe, and other places. But also, very importantly, to make a case to governments across the world that it's not tenable to continue working with an illegitimate government, to continue working with a government which does not have respect for the rule of law, for democracy, and good governance. So that's one of the reasons why we keep moving and making a strong case to the people out there that it's important for these countries to understand, to associate with, and support a regime which has no regard for its citizens and the people. They are doing a disservice to themselves and definitely their legacy. Of course, these trips have paid off in some cases, and other cases we continue trying. And even when we don't see immediate gains, we know that it will be worth it. In terms of what NUP is doing, of course, ours is a continuous struggle, like we've been saying. We continue to organize our people. You've been seeing the Kunga activities all across the country, trying to have mobilization teams all across. Civic education is extremely important, and we've been having that element. And of course, every once in a while, participating in elections and other forms of elections that come up in order for us to keep our people educated and updated on what is going on.
So how have you found working across Africa with pro-democracy movements, with young people across Africa? How has that exchange benefited our young people in Uganda? And when you go on these, do you kind of build lasting relationships? Do you interconnect them with the young people back in Uganda? Are there sort of structures for that? Or how does it work? In terms of keeping that sort of momentum of working across Africa with young people and, with pro-democracy movements?
Definitely, we in some cases we've been able to connect our people with pro-democracy activists across the world and indeed on the African continent. We've even had some exchange programs in the past where some of our leaders and these young leaders get opportunities to go to Tanzania, to go to South Africa, to get training, and also to do some bit of betting on what activists elsewhere are doing. So yeah, of course, unfortunately, given the environment we live in, sometimes these activities are not publicized. But we do that a lot. Our people sometimes chance to go and see what activists everywhere else are doing, to learn from other political parties and how they are structured, and what lessons we can learn from them. But yes, our interest is really, really. We've been saying that there was a generation which fought against colonialism in Africa, and then there came another generation which was fighting, or so-called the liberators, who claimed they were fighting against dictatorship. And in my sense, there's now need for a third force, a third move, to learn from other political parties and how they are structured, and what lessons we can learn from them. But yes, our interest is really, really. We've been saying that there was a generation which fought against colonialism in Africa, and then there came another generation which was fighting, or so-called the liberators, who claimed they were fighting against dictatorship. And in my sense, there's now need for a third force, a third movement in Africa. And you see, when the Musevenis, or be it the anti-colonial forces, were fighting, they built connections all across, and led to the formation of OAU, the Organization of African Unity. And even when the Musevenis were fighting what they called they were working very closely with other movements elsewhere. And so we think that this is a time for us also, as a generation, to connect more, especially across the continent, because we have shared aspirations. If you see what the young people in Senegal are fighting for, to have better democratic rights. Some of the opposition leaders there have been blocked from contesting. Although Senegal is much, much more democratic than Uganda, of course, but you see that we have aspirations which bring us together, and that's why we need to build these networks.
Right. Okay. Well, staying on, the intercontinental, continental sort of third wave, and you're part of a generation of new African leaders who don't seem to have any link to the colonial past. You're sort of born colonial and post-independent Uganda, and sort of don't have that thing that the Musevenis of this world have. But you're part of a new sort of movement, the movement that you talk about, a Pan-African movement or wave of leaders. And I wonder, with all with the restrictions or the constraints back home, how do you deal with situations, for example, with what's happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo? We've been holding Twitter spaces with thousands of Congolese and Rwandan and even Ugandan citizens who are concerned and worried about the resurgence, and the insecurity that's threatening to sort of start again, and then the humanitarian implications for us in the Great Lakes region in terms of refugees. How is NUP prepared, or sort of what has NUP got to say about what's actually happening now in the Congo?
Well, NUP has made it clear that it supports,
David, are you there? Are you back with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead. I'll let you continue. Thank you.
Yeah, so sorry about that. The internet glitches, yeah, as you know, so I keep trying to switch lines. But I was trying to talk about the situation, for example, in Congo, and I said that the stand of NUP has always been to support or to stand with pro-democracy forces everywhere in the world, to stand with people who feel oppressed. And so, that's why I said we're standing with the people of Ukraine who are going through incredible suffering, as everyone knows, and the challenges they're going through. And that's our approach. And we've like I said, we've built networks across the board. In some cases, we've been able. Actually, the People Power movement has inspired very many movements and people across Africa. So there are people who come from South Sudan to us to say, we want you guys to come and we build networks. Some people I know have come from the Congo and other places, basically. So what I can say is that it's very unfortunate what's happening in Congo. I've been looking at some of the videos, as I believe everyone else has, the kind of violence that's going on there, and it's unfortunate. So, for example, we've made it clear that General Museveni and his army should not invade. And actually, this is our army, it's the Uganda People's Defense. But unfortunately, he continues to use them to do things that we completely disagree with. The venturism in the Congo. We came out last time and when they were talking about this operation Shuja, and we definitely condemned it, and because it came at the heels of the condemnation of Uganda by the ICJ. We have to pay lots and lots of money to the Congo after invading that country, plundering its resources, and doing all sorts of things, as the ICJ found. Unfortunately, it will not be General Museveni and his people to bear this cost, but the people of Uganda, you and me. So we think that unfortunately, these a person like General Museveni, I don't think cares what the people think about his invention of that country. But we hope he can, wake up to his senses and realize that actually there is a extermination of the people, so that this venturism of his comes to an end.
Thank you. And what about, a word about the refugee crisis and the sort of the masses who are crossing into Uganda? Do you know what's happening in terms of humanitarianism? Because also, I don't know if you agree, I find that it's almost like Museveni creates these crises and gets funding from abroad, and somehow Uganda becomes a haven for people, but they wouldn't even be there if Museveni did not have this adventurism that you talk about, and the military adventures, which are usually to go and plunder. What do you think about Uganda being used? Of course, we have to give refuge, but what are your views on the refugees that are coming in, and how they come to be in Uganda?
Definitely, you know, Uganda, first of all, has been receiving refugees. Museveni and his people try to, you know, show that it's a policy. But if you actually look at the records, even as early as 1926, Uganda was receiving refugees. In 1959, the Rwandese were coming to Uganda, and Uganda gave them a safe haven. And so Uganda's policy of receiving refugees has always been there, and it's, I think, in our culture to be, you know, open to people who are in danger. The challenge that I see right now, and we've been talking about it, is that a lot of times General Museveni wants to make himself indispensable within the Great Lakes region. And so a lot of times he will start a conflict and then come up to say that he's the one who has a solution to ending that conflict. So my view, and sometimes where the international community fails us, is that they don't look at the cause, the original cause of the challenge. They're always looking at the outcomes of these problems. If Museveni had not gone into South Sudan to do what he did there, if he did not go to the Congo to do what he did there, if he's always not going, sending out troops to the Equatorial Guinea and wherever else he has sent these troops of ours, perhaps there wouldn't be need for him, you know, coming as a messiah now, and there wouldn't be need for refugees to come to that. But then he goes, creates chaos somewhere, and then somehow convinces the international community that I am the only one who can, first of all, give a refuge to all these people who are escaping from that situation, and secondly, that I'm the one who can actually put that conflict to an end, etc., etc. So the other day we were in Somaliland, and we're having a discussion on peace and security. And one of the speakers posed a very important question. And he said, do you think it is in Museveni's interest for the war in Somalia to end, for Somalia to be peaceful? When actually General Museveni is sort of a carrot and stick approach, which he applies both here in Uganda but also across the region, is well known. So he will come in, and you remember when they started you know, questioning his human rights record and everything, he threatened to withdraw troops from Somalia. So that has always been the way the regime in Uganda operates. So they are in Somalia, and the question to everybody should be, do you think genuinely he would be interested in that situation coming to an end? Because then he knows that if that situation maybe comes to an end, he will no longer be needed. And so these are the unfortunate challenges that we continue to experience within this region.
And this is what this is part of the problem of why why Museveni stays in this idea that he's indispensable and he's the Western powers man in the region. But increasingly, as we saw at the last election, the human rights violence and the killings of 18th November 2021, when NUP supporters were killed. So I wonder about what your feelings are and how the West actually operates on the ground in Uganda, that on one hand, they seem to be propping up Museveni and somewhat ignoring the excesses and the violence and the killings and the atrocities that are going on. How, I mean, when you're talking to them, how exactly are they dealing with this sort of duality of having to work with this monstrous man on one hand and then having to deal with their own sort of national interests? And how will NUP ensure that the relationship with the various development partners continues if, you know, when I should say, they take power from Museveni, or they come into power?
Yeah, so we have made it clear to our development partners, first of all, that Uganda has always been a home to refugees, and if they are refugees, they will always be welcome in this country. We've also made it clear that we are against terrorism and such other things. Museveni portrays himself as a master in terrorism and that kind of thing.
Sorry, you've got a glitch. David, you've got a bit of a glitch. I don't know if you've got some recording nearby or something.
No, not at all. Is it better now?
Yes, it's better. Go ahead.
Yeah, as I said, what we said to development partners is that they should not relate to revenue. They should relate to the people.
Happening again. I don't know if anybody else can see it, but it's sort of, can hear it. It's kind of this woozy thing that's happening. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Sort of intermittently. You're going on and off. Sorry, those are the things that happen when, you know, with spaces, especially when you're in Uganda. This is perfectly normal to people who are used to spaces, but that's fine. We can continue with our conversation. People just have to enjoy to journey every time we get a glitch, but not a problem. So yes, you were talking about was sevens expansionism and our development partners. Please
I really
continue.
don't know where you lost me or where I lost you, because I kept talking on and on, but
right at the start of the conversation where you were telling us that you had, you know, you've reassured your development partners, and then you started going funny.
Oh, sorry. So I was saying that
No.
we have made it clear to them that they should not relate with General Museveni as an individual, but they should relate with the people of Uganda. And secondly, that they are the oxygen which keeps the regime alive in this country. And we've said that they should stop sponsoring our oppression. They should stop propping up a dictatorial regime. And we are grateful for some of the sanctions that have been imposed. For example, the travel bans by the United States on some of the officials of the regime, and you know, some of the human rights violators. But we think it's not enough, and we think the international community needs to do more to show that they actually believe in the values which they profess to believe. And when we've met with them, we've had these candid conversations. They've expressed their frustrations also in many cases. And I think that's why we continue pushing. That's why we continue visiting Western capitals, capitals here in Africa and other places to make that strong case.
Right. Thank you. What I was going to say, you keep. I can't. I can't open up the lines without me talking about this because it's very close to my heart. I think you have a daughter. You're father of a daughter.
Daughters, actually.
Daughters, exactly, plural. So you will understand my questions. One of my biggest issues, or up to date, has been the visibility of women within the top echelons of NUP. As a father of girls, you know how important, I mean, as a father yourself, you know, having spoken about your own father, you know how important to inspire these young people, boys and girls, but especially girls, to sort of stand up and step up, and the sort of values that you inculcate in them. My question is really about the visibility of women and the decision-making process of women, the decision-making process of NUP, and how women play into that. And sometimes I've had the feeling, especially when I've listened or heard back from various leaders within the NUP, mainly in the diaspora and elsewhere, women tend to be almost tokens, brought out or willed out for sort of photo ops. And it gets to me because you have so many talented young people, older people, you know, and we seem to see the same faces. And I wonder how that's going to change, because it does matter, you know, being seen that, for example, when you go on your travels, you know, the various operations within NUP, what is the role of women within NUP beyond visibility? Some people even accuse NUP of tokenism, of sort of having women do the feminine jobs. What's your take on that?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I will not really try to put up a defense or anything like that. We have a challenge, I think, and I think it's you know, it's a Ugandan challenge in a way, and many parts of the world actually, especially when you're dealing with a situation like we are dealing with. So at a leadership level, we've always been deliberate to try and really have women as involved in every form of activity as you know, possibly can. But I'll also say that there are challenges. For example, you saw what kind of election we had, and the kind of violence, the kind of challenge we had. So we found in many cases that women, it was a little bit more difficult for many women to be on the front line than it was for the men. So that's part of, I think, one of the challenges that happens, that for some reason, women feel, you know, that this is a very, very dangerous place to be at the forefront. You know, we are not running a normal political party where, you know, you have activities and this and this and that. And so many times,
Oh no, it's happening again. Not to worry, you there? Um, oh, you're gonna have to go and come back. You've gone off again. This is so.
As much as men. But with what I can say is, for example, we've had trainings specifically designed for women, women activists about these issues to see how they can involve etc etc. But I also say that, for example, when NUP started, and this is a story that many people don't know about. I remember we were in a room. Our president brought together a team of people who had been working with. I was his lecturer at school. He had been seeing Joel on TV and what he was doing. We had Karamaji Andrew, who was a social activist and that kind of thing. There was Chairman Nyanzi, who played a very fundamental role in the campaign in Chadondo, etc etc. So that was the sort of the beginning of the movement. And so I'm trying to explain that when you say you get to see these same faces, but we are deliberate. And one of the things we are trying to do, even from our institutions wing, if you talk to Comrade Musiri, Nambasa, Shamim, and others, we've been saying let's bring other leaders on board, other young leaders on board, so that it's not the same faces everywhere. But I admit, definitely a challenge, and I think we need to take definite steps to address it, because we all know that a revolution which does not empower women as much as men is dead on arrival. So it must be deliberate on our end as leaders. But we also, I feel also that you need to encourage women. I don't even know how to say encourage them, because sometimes they come and then consequences are dire. For example, the situation which Marinos Alexandria went through a few months back, in a way deters other women from coming to the front line, because when Marinos comes out to tell her story of what these thugs did to her, it becomes a bit difficult to convince women. And every time we've had these trainings, they sort of ask you so many questions out of fear of what might happen to them when they come on the front line. But I definitely agree, and I'm open to getting some of the ideas through which we can encourage women to take more prominent roles in NUP.
Excellent, great news. Now, part of the problem, or one of the things that have been used by this regime against women activists, is the use of rape. And sexual violence when they've been arrested. You've even got some mothers, NUP mothers, who are still in prison. I don't even know what the update is or what's the current position or state of Andrea, but there's many, many Andreas that never sort of come to the forefront because of fear, because of torture, because of trauma. And could you tell us a little bit more about women who continue to be incarcerated as a result of the arrests during the last election, and then what systems have you got in place, if at all, to help these women sort of rehabilitate and get back into society given the trauma? And then if those structures are not there, what needs to be done, and what can people or other women and men or whatever, or well-wishers, do towards the effort in sort of just to shore up these women to get back on their feet, and then to rebel against the use of sexual violence, not just, by the military, by the various security organs against, in Uganda?
Yeah, so first of all, it's true that women have been targeted, like I said, sexually, and sexual violence is a tool. But I also want to say that it's not only women who are raped. We have cases where men themselves, young men, have reported rape. So it's unfortunate what happens. And what systems are in place? Of course, usually in as you've seen, Jim's response is always targeted to the kind of activism that the citizens put across. So if there are no protests for some time, then you see that cases of abduction, of rape, or whatever, torture and others sort of reduce. But when the citizens come out to express themselves, whether through trying to peacefully assemble, express themselves in other ways, then the regime also hastens its machinery. And so our approaches have sort of been ad hoc, that for example, immediately after elections, when So many women were, you know, in jail, and all these kinds of challenges. We organized sessions, and Flavia was leading this. Honorable Flavia Karule, the head of Women Wing in NUP, where she was, you know, together with the other facilitators, trying to talk to these young women, encourage them, counsel them, listen to them, etc., etc. Because and you know, some women have not been direct victims, but secondary victims. For example, all these young men who were abducted, many of them not even, you know, not ever seen again. They left behind wives, they left behind children. So, you know, there's a need for a lot of counseling, a lot of support for these families. Of course, as NUP, and maybe soon we'll be, you know, showing some of the figures as the financial year comes to an end. But if you see how much money we spent on welfare just between June last year and June this year, it's incredible. And so sometimes that's what we can do to help these people with food, accommodation, helping prisoners themselves, some of the kids, you know, helping them with school fees, and many other things. So we've been trying to help on one hand to, you know, give psychosocial social support, counseling, and all that. But I cannot say that we have enough resources in terms of human resources and you know, other logistical requirements to do that. And I want to appreciate, for example, there's an NGO in Uganda which you know, rehabilitates torture victims. So in cases where we've been overwhelmed, some of these people will refer them to those organizations which have the necessary expertise.
Right. Okay. So is there sort of, do you have like an organization or part of the welfare office where people who have been through these traumas, where people do help, where people can send help? Is there sort of an official number, an official line? How does that work?
Yeah, you know, we put an on fundraising at some point last year, I think it was after elections, and we knew, of course, that our people were a bit discouraged after a stolen election and all that, and so they needed to recover also. So we said, you know what, let's put a hold. In any case, the party now has parliament, it has councillors, presence in parliament and all that. There's money allocated by parliament which comes to political parties. So we said, you know, for now, use the resources that it already has at its disposal. But that does not mean that we do not, of course, continue to receive or accept donations of any kind to the party. Definitely we do. And we appreciate very, very much our diaspora chapters, which have always come in also on ad hoc basis now. When there's an issue, for example, when our were arrested, some diaspora chapters came through to assist. Some diaspora chapters came to assist, you know, when there was ED and then Easter, to support families of these victims of torture and families of the people who are still in jail and that kind of thing. So that is what we've been doing for now. We initially decided to put a hold on fundraising efforts, but if anybody wants to, you know, contribute to the party, we can. There's an online link which you can use to send a contribution, but also there's a mobile money number which you can send some help to of our accountant.
Excellent. I know actually already you and I have talked about this in another space when we talk about accountability and having sort of an annual report coming out and the concerns that people, perhaps you can repeat what you said then, the concerns that a lot of people in the diaspora have in terms of transparency and accountability. And one of the things you said at the time was the law, I think, I don't know, chapter 12 or something of a particular law or act, which insists that you have to report whatever external funding you get as a political party. And once you do that, you need to have complete transparency with names, etc., etc. And that stops from a lot of people who would like to participate from taking part, because obviously the government requires you to note down the names of your donors. And I wondered whether you've thought of a way how the various chapters within the various diaspora regions, how they could bypass this by perhaps organizing funds or sponsorship or partnerships with various structures within NUP? Have you found a way of sort of getting around that? Or if you can explain a little bit about what NUP plans to do in terms of transparency and accountability for those people who don't know. Thanks.
Yeah, well, like I said, we first of all believe in accountability and transparency. These are values which we are trying to, fight for in this country. Make sure that there is full accountability, bit of funds, but also we know that accountability goes beyond just mere accounting for funds. One of the things I was explaining the last time was that when people talk about accountability, sometimes they don't seem to understand the challenges you have. And I said that immediately after elections, we compiled a report which had, every penny that had come through to us from whoever, and we sat down and said, what do we do now? But there's that provision in the law which requires you to, and it's Section 12 of the Political Parties and Organizations Act, which requires every political party to submit, including names of people who have made donations and all that. And of course, we understand how dangerous that would be for our people. So it's a delicate balance to make. And like I said, one of the discussions we've been having was that maybe we just tell our people, we give them, we say, okay, this is what we got this year in terms of funding from, monies allocated to parliament, from donations, from MPs' contributions. And these are the clusters. This is, we spend so much on welfare, we spend so much on, mobilization activities, we spend so much on, because we have, NUP has 8 departments currently, and the first department is mobilization. Then we have finance and administration, we have diaspora and international relations, we have policy and research, we have the legal department, we have welfare as a standalone, we have, I don't know how many I've spoken about, but yeah, we have 8 departments. So we need to make, one of the things we're discussing is that we just talk about what has gone to which department for this particular financial year, and that's a conversation we've been having with the finance committee. But that if you were to reveal the names of people who are contributing funds, then they'll be in trouble. People have been stopped at the airport for making Facebook posts, the regime and inconvenience and that kind of thing. So it's a delicate balance. You don't want to put people in such a tricky situation. But also how we're able to go about it, for example, with regard to the election, was that we only accounted for what, that is to the EC, we accounted for what came to the party directly. But there are many diaspora chapters which were funding activities directly without going through the party. But of course, for example, someone will inform the party and say, we want to support our team, our Northern Uganda chapter. And then we say, okay, the coordinator there is so and so. And so you give funds directly to a cause as opposed to funding the party and then having to put us in a situation of having to count for it with names and that kind of thing. So that's one of the approaches we've been using.
Right. Thank you. And I'm going to open up the phone lines very soon, or not phone lines, but open up the space for people to directly ask you questions. I just wanted to sort of ask, part of the problem that I see, or some of me and my friends see, in terms of how what's propping up Museveni and continues to sort of ensure that he remains in power, is his connection or his very strong ties with various conglomerates that operate within Uganda. So, for example, currently you have got Total and I think it's Sunuk or Sunuk, Kanuka. I don't know, what it actually, how to pronounce it, but the various organizations or companies that operate within Uganda. Currently, there's a lot of protests around the world about the pipeline that is trying to, or Museveni is trying, I think it's called EcoOp, that Museveni is trying or working with various, some of our neighbors to put up. And I wonder, what exactly does NUP have any links to these conglomerates, and do you hold accountable for their continued working with Museveni as part of the reason that he stays in power? Because if they, their economics are tied up with the regime, it makes it very, very difficult to hold him accountable.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's not only from Museveni, but all these despots try to, work with all these conglomerates and, multinational corporations to, keep themselves in power, because the interest of those companies or conglomerates, their main interest is profit. Their main interest is their business interests. And somehow they think the regime, what can, secure their interest in the country. And if you look at the oil agreements, first of all, you've been talking about Sinuk, and you remember a few years ago there was a very, very big issue with the kind of agreements that the regime was making with multinational corporations, many of them riddled with corruption of unimaginable proportions. A lot of times, Uganda ending up with terrible, terrible deals. The recent example of the coffee agreement is, we all know about it. So I think, the question, the most important question for us is, what can we do? First of all, where do we stand on investment? What policies or what principles do we stand by? How do we think that these kinds of agreements which Museveni makes with these companies or corporations, how do we think they can be changed to be to benefit Uganda, to benefit our country? And so that's how I see the question of the pipeline. There have, of course, been very, very critical concerns about environment. There have been critical concerns about compensation of people on land. And you remember General Museveni coming up with a proposal to say that people should be, government should take over land, and then the compensation discussions come later on. So these are some of the critical issues that we've been raising and been discussing. But Juliana, I can tell you that, for me, sometimes, and this is what I've been telling many people, including our international partners, that Uganda's problem is really, really not where we stand on these policy issues. And sometimes they try to push us in the corner to ask us, how would you handle this situation? How would you handle this situation? For me, I think that if you do not have a dictatorial regime in place, and you have a regime or a government actually that listens to the people, that is accountable to the people, that has the interests of the people at heart, then every deal that comes or every investment that comes, you have to look at it from that prism. The human capital development. You look at the oil sector and which people are benefiting from the oil sector. You look at who is being employed in the oil sector in Uganda, who is actually taking over the land. There was a report at some point about the massive land grabs in Bunyoro, the oil region and the Albertine region and all that. So I think really, really the question is, how do we remove the dictatorship and establish a government which will work in the interest of the people?
So you are a native son or grandchild of the great nation of Bunyoro. How do you think this pipeline and the excavation of oil within that region, what do you think the environmental impact will be? And how are the people or the nationals or the Bunyoro people, are they welcoming the oil pipe, or is it something that they've already seen the degradation and they already see the impact that it's having on their lands? This should be pertinent to you because you literally are part. This is the land of your ancestors.
Well, actually, the challenge, the bigger challenge is that people are not allowed to protest in this country, because if people are allowed to protest, they would be coming out to express their thoughts on some of these issues. So when you say, what do the people of Bunyoro think about this? The people of Uganda are disempowered. I was in Karamoja some time back, and we just came back from Omoro. I mean, when you look at the population in these areas, you feel like crying. Completely disempowered. They just have no say whatsoever about anything. So in a situation where people are not able to protest, where people are kept in the dark, if you go and ask anybody in Bunyoro about the oil agreements, they will tell you they don't know. Why? Because the regime made it clear it is SFC guarding the oil wells and everything. They called it a strategic installation, and deployed SFC there and did whatever they did. So to ask the people of Bunyoro, the ordinary people of Uganda, to even understand the implication, the environmental implications or the climate change implications of the oil pipeline, I think it's to ask for too much. It's just maybe a few elite who are having these conversations, but the people on ground have largely been, kept away from these debates. And one of the things that we've been discussing and we've raised, for example, is that if oil is found in Bunyoro, what are the people of Bunyoro benefiting from this? Yes, it's a national asset. It's going to be used to develop a country, blah, blah, blah. But we know what that means in the Ugandan context. And we have said, first of all, that employment should go to the people in Bunyoro. But I think several times there have been lists coming up of people who have benefited from scholarships to go and see about oil, be it, on the scientific angle, the legal angle, the economic angle, etc., etc. And the people of Bunyoro have come out several times complain about these things. Away from employment, of course, we have made it clear that there should be a percentage of the proceeds that goes to that region, because you're messing up the environment. There are many things that are going to happen to that place as a result of extraction. But those people must also benefit in a way. So you must take proceeds, be it 15%, and say this percentage is allocated specifically for Bunyoro sub-region. If you're taking gold and diamonds and whatever from Karamoja sub-region, the people as poor as they are, you must bring back, if that's what I will call it. You must give back to that community.
Reinvest the proceeds into the local communities.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to open up. Thank you so much. I'm going to open up the space so people can come in and ask their questions. So please send your requests through. I'll be happy to sort of put you through. Mainly my questions, I think, are done, and I'm just going to bring in Black Pem Doctor, and then whoever else would like to ask Lewis a question, feel free to send your requests in. Thank you.
Hi, Juliana and David Rubagonya. Thank you so much for creating this space and for giving us a voice in a country that so many people remain voiceless. I have two questions addressed to the speaker. One has to do with political prisoners. What is NUP doing to ensure that political prisoners, we have some high-profile ones like Segrinya and Sewanyana, but there are countless others that are not as high profile. What are they doing to ensure that the political prisoners don't stay on remand indefinitely? And secondly, since this is a collective effort, is there anything the diaspora can do to raise awareness? Can we write our congressmen, senators, etc., etc.? The second one has to do with accountability. From what David was doing, part of the reason they keep fewer records, especially with diaspora funds, is to protect the privacy of people and to mitigate possible harassment from the NRM government. But online and on social media, there've been voices, several voices, every couple of months you read something about it, with people complaining about accountability. Going forward, how does the chapter and the headquarters of NUP in Uganda ensure that accountability of funds collected in the diaspora will be utilized for what they've been collected for, that the money won't be embezzled, and what will they do to give people confidence that we are different from the thieving government of Museveni? Thank you.
Juliana, would you want me to respond immediately?
Yes, please. Please go ahead. Yes.
All right.
Whilst I'll bring other people in. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you very, very much. On the question of the political prisoners, we've tried actually to do many activities around keeping the situation alive. You've seen our visit them a number of times. Even last week I was at Chitaya to visit them. Myself, I've been going there several times. So what we're doing things around these political prisoners. We have gone to courts of Uganda, as you know. There's a case in the Constitutional Court, which the Constitutional Court actually ruled in our favor. It's an old case which was filed initially by Honorable Kabazugulu Kamaiko. It was basically challenging the trial of civilians in military courts. And when our people were being tried in military courts, we tried to, join that case to file a fresh suit, and we advised that maybe we should support this other case that was already ongoing. And of course, the Supreme Court put the implementation of that decision on a hold. I don't know if it will, be decided soon with, Owinidolo as Chief Justice of Uganda. We all know the challenges there, but let's be optimistic and see what happens. As you know, we're also, proceeding with a case at the International Criminal Court, to try and say, look, there are crimes against humanity being committed in Uganda. We are also, in the past, of course, we've gone to the Human Rights Committee of Parliament, the Uganda Human Rights Commission. We have tried to use every avenue, and it has been clear that the Ugandan avenues cannot work, cannot help these people, but we continue to try. So what has largely happened is that the General Court Martial, previously, I think after elections, had so many people, thousands of people in that court, but they were using them as a sort of, a bait to say, let's see how NUP will respond, because they knew that there were likely to be protests after a rigged election. And, the court martial made it clear that they were going to be released, after a few months, every once in a while, some are released, sort of waiting to see what NUP plans to do. So that's the approach of the regime with regard to these people. And I'm glad to note that out of over 3,000 recorded people that were in jails immediately after the election, we have records of about 200 now who are either still in prison or missing. Those who are missing, who we surely know, are about 16. But I mean, whose whereabouts nobody knows up to now. But almost every week, new people come up to tell us that their siblings, their spouses, or whatever are still missing up to now. And our human rights desk continues to record these people, and as well as the welfare desk. So we're doing many things around that, and I think the diaspora community should do more as well. I think you need to continue raising their voices. As you know, last week, our president was at the prison to see Olivia Lutaya, a young lady who has been there for over a year now, and many others. So I think diaspora should also do the same thing, raise the voice of these people, call the senators, congressmen and women, etc., etc. Now, finally, on the question of accountability, I think I've really explained this issue. I don't know. I mean, we need to get a better model that, because even if we give a breakdown, like I'm saying, maybe look at other records, but we've also said that these records are available. The law requires us to submit records of expenditure to the Electoral Commission, and we do that, and the records are there. But this is largely about the money which comes from Parliament, which in other words the regime knows about. As regards the funds which were collected by the diaspora, I've spoken about it, and one of the suggestions we had was that maybe we need to have members, like 2 or 3 leaders within the diaspora, as part of a finance committee, so that they attend virtually the meetings of the finance committee, and when we are making decisions, now there's this challenge, we're going to spend on this, so that they are aware. But this is information which they are probably not likely to put out in the public, again, because of the challenges. For example, I talked about welfare, and you know how sometimes how challenging this is. You're taking care of people either whose whose spouse is missing, whose child was killed. These people need their privacy. Sometimes they don't want to even come out again for security reasons and all that. But I think if we have, once the diaspora leadership is reconstituted, and if you see the report which was issued by Honorable Asha Kabanda and her committee, it made a recommendation to that effect, that at least some leaders within the diaspora should be part of the accountability committee or the finance committee, which then the diaspora community can rely on for accountability.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Peter Ikakoro. Thank you.
Okay, Juliana, thank you so much for bringing me in. First and foremost, obviously one of the leaders in the UK chapter, and I would really love to get in touch with you and really, because you are such a vibrant participant in the chapter. But I think I would like us to meet after this and see what we can do.
I don't actually live in the UK, but I may sound it, but I don't live there. So no, I don't. Sorry.
No, sorry about that. Okay, all right. I just wanted to comment on a number of things, having listened to the whole discussion. I think the first one I would like
Is Peter
to
speaking? I can't hear him at all.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can't hear you. Yes, David, he's speaking. Can you hear
Can
him?
you all hear me?
No, not at all. I can't hear him at all.
Okay. He's gonna come back in. Peter.
Hello, yes, Julian, I'm here.
David, can you hear him?
No, I can't.
If you'd like to ask your
hear me though.
Yeah, I think I can hear you, and then I'll transfer your question on to David. Would you like to ask it, nevertheless?
Yes, actually, there's a number of comments, if you can just note it down. I think the first one is about the wealth accountability and resources. As a diaspora, I think we have actually been a bit unrealistic about what's happening at home in terms of accountability. We expect accountability like we do in, say, in my office, whereby you produce an annual report and that has everything. I think the way I see, the way I request David Lewis to go on is, yes, give us a breakdown and say, these are the areas of this is the money we get roughly, or this is the areas we covered. These are the areas that need to be covered. And then the diaspora can look at that at least. Because I appreciate the fact you say that because of the prevailing political environment, you really can't avail all the details. So yes, but give us at least a breakdown of, especially the iPod money. The iPod money is a saw in our back, which has been, used by our opponents to sort of kick NUP. So I think you sort of need to clarify which areas of work, I would say not specific, but which of work that money is going into. That's my
Sorry, Peter. Let me just get that through to David first, because you've got. I'm also going to limit the time that everybody speaks because there's many, just to ensure that we get as many people in as possible.
Okay,
David,
can I give you others quickly, and then you can put it all together, please.
Okay, go on, go ahead.
Okay. The next point is David Lewis's regional offices. We want regional offices functional as soon as possible because at the moment it's Kampala Central that we are. Actually, our main work should be in the regions. Okay, I'll be quick. The third one I want to talk about is obviously donations. The chapters in the diaspora, and obviously the people want to donate. Actually, if you donate to the UK chapter, we then can send that money as the UK chapter, so your name doesn't come out anywhere because we have an account. We are accountable to our members. We can donate that. Very quickly, the last one is David Lewis. You really have to comment to us about the 40 million bribe, and we really need to know who took the bribe, who hasn't. We're not going to back off from that. Thank you.
Gosh. Okay. Thank you. David, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, brilliant. I'm just going to quickly run through his questions. The first one comes in, he wanted to talk about accountability and how he feels, it was more a comment, he feels that perhaps people in the diaspora are not realistic about how things happen in Uganda. And he suggests that rather than expect sort of a breakdown, minutia of explaining every cent, perhaps you can group it together and say this amount, which is, I suppose, what you suggested earlier. But you can more talk about, for example, this is going to transportation, this is going to education, this is going to the welfare. So rather than group it, rather than do it individually, where you're, like the UK, like you were saying, it is best to kind of do it to actually communicate that to the diaspora, saying that we can't literally give out a penny by penny breakdown, but we can give accountability in terms of, say, units or divisions within NUP, which I think is exactly what you said. But anyhow, the other thing he talks about is donations. To avoid the problems with the government, have you thought of working with the various chapters? For example, in the UK, they have an official account where they are accountable to their members, so they can collect in the UK, where names don't necessarily need to be printed, and then they sort of wire that money across to you as the UK chapter, and therefore you bypass the problem of having to name absolutely everyone and individuals. Fourthly, he talks about regional offices. He insists that NUP needs to open up regional offices beyond Kampala and what he considers to be the central region. He says they need to be up ASAP, but I hope you have the funding for all of that, because all of this is cost. And then he talks about iPod money. apparently it's a thorn in the back of his constituents. He's a leader, I think, in the UK, he says, and he absolutely would needs to know about that. Then he talks about the 40 million who got it and who did. There you go. That's what his questions. I hope that's enough. Would you like to
All right. Very glad to hear from Peter Ekakoru. He's our leader in the UK, and we appreciate all the work that the chapter in the UK continues to do. On the first issue, there are sort of many questions, but I think interrelated. In terms of his advice, like I said, and I agree with him, it's one of the things we've been talking about. Although I know what will happen when we give this breakdown, then there will be voices saying, "Oh, give us details. Why is it that you spent on this and not on this?" And that sort of thing. If you, for example, talk about how much you spend on welfare, but nonetheless, we'll do that because I think our people need to know, especially what we get as a party and what we do. This is not only a challenge for NUP. Actually, if you see, there's no single party in Uganda which does that kind of accountability, and there are reasons why, which is what I tried to explain. Be it the parties that were there before us, given the dynamics on the ground. And one of the things, of course, I did not talk about is what, in the UK or in Switzerland or wherever, or Sweden, there are things that a political party is expected to do and not to do. Because, for example, it's a shame that a political party can be thinking of establishing a medical department, because that shouldn't be our business, having a medical team that every time you travel for an activity, you go with an ambulance, you go with, then you have doctors on standby in case someone is injured or whatever. But yet in Uganda, you find that, you have to have all these things in place because every time you go out for an political activity, you're almost going for war. And, there are other activities I don't want to talk about here, which you find yourself doing, which in another country, a political party would never have to engage in. So I think the comrades need to understand the different dynamics. The second thing, I think he raises a very, very brilliant idea about, for example, giving funds as a UK chapter. Definitely that would be very helpful. If it's a legal entity, I think that's something that I definitely agree with. Let me again reiterate that we are not part of IPOD and we do not get any money from IPOD. I will just explain this. The law in 2020, the Political Parties and Organizations Act, was amended to provide that all political parties which are represented in Parliament should get some funding based on their numerical strength in Parliament. And that money has always been there. Of course, it was 10 billion shillings initially, which is divided then by the parties which are within Parliament. And that, of course, it's for the whole year. So you just calculate the percentage which a political party is entitled to. If NUP has 57 members of Parliament out of 512, then that's a percentage of that's the money that it's getting according to that law. It's unjust, of course, and unfair, first of all, because away from the parties which are in Parliament, there are other political parties. There are about 26 registered political parties in Uganda. And our view would be that even those political parties should be funded to do activities or to be able to, because this is a case of saying that you're only giving those who already have, and those who don't have, there's nothing that they get to have. But the other problem is that the NRM looked at it, or even when they were coming up with this whole idea, they were looking at how they will be funded, how they were looking for a legal route away from this money which they continue using political activities. They also wanted another legal route through which they can access public funds. So you'll find that, for example, currently they take 75% of whatever money comes from which is allocated by Parliament. So I wanted to clarify that we are not part of IPOD. There are some benefits that come with being in IPOD. There's funding which comes from IPOD. There are capacity building opportunities for political parties. All these opportunities which we said we are not going to partake of because we are not part of IPOD. So I want to make it clear that, of course, our detractors continue saying IPOD money, but we as NUP do not get any penny from IPOD because we are not members of IPOD. And I think finally there was a question on the 40 million shillings given to MPs. So we all know how it happened, and I think it was the other Saturday when some members of parliament started calling the party leadership. They called the president, some called myself, Joel and other leaders, and they were saying, you know what, there's money being given out to MPs. Should we go and pick it? What is the position of this of NUP on this money and that kind of thing? We did not know about it initially, so we had to found out what was going on. It was very, very unfortunate because according to the accounts received, this money was being given out in cash for the opposition and independent members of parliament. They were getting it at Anita Among's place, the Speaker of Parliament. And as for the NRM, they're picking it somewhere at some office at Parliament and all that. So we thought, of course, it was wrong, it was immoral, it was illegal, because how can public funds be handled in that way? And I think that's why they came up with a statement claiming that this was a hoax, that money was never given, blah, blah, blah. But it's on record, and you've seen members of parliament come out to make press statements about this. One of the unfortunate things about this debate is that people have focused on NUP members of parliament instead of focusing on the regime, because all of us should be asking ourselves, this is over 20.4 billion shillings. How many schools can be built with that money? How many hospitals? How many roads can be constructed in infrastructure projects, etc., etc. We are busy borrowing money every other day, but see what the money is being used for. So I think one of the critical things is not, it is very important for our members to be accountable, and our president has spoken out about this and clearly said that this money was wrong and it should be returned, and several members of parliament who had picked this money were able to take it back wherever they had picked it from. One of the challenges that we have found is that people are creating fake lists every other day because this money was given out in secrecy. Although, the mafia regime that we have, we are told there were cameras recording whoever was getting this money. But as NUP, we do not have any list officially. But good enough, some members volunteered to say, I thought this money was legal. Now that you people appointed me to the challenge, I'm taking it back. And so they have taken it back. But I think the people of Uganda must be asking a very critical question. Why are public funds being handled in this manner? How can we make sure that there's accountability? And how can we make sure that the people who are engaged in this grand corruption can be brought to book?
Thank you. Is there any sort of reprimand or disciplinary action within the party that's going to be taken against the MPs that collected it? Now, you can say that they were naive. They're sort of a group of young people who've just come into very powerful positions in government, but it's also setting a precedent for what happens later. I don't think anybody is naive enough to know that you do not go to someone's private residence and collect money. Is there any sort of sanction or sort of disciplinary action that's going to take place against those people who, within NUP, who took the funds?
Well, what we said is that for now, the first step is take back the money. And after that step, then we'll sit down and discuss what happened, first of all, to those who we know took the money and did not return it. Secondly, the question you're asking broadly, how do we deal with this question of people walking into someone's home and taking the money? These are discussions we are having, and I think at the right time we'll inform the nation of what we decide about it.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in, this is Ron, because I think he's one of the first people who put his hands up. Then we're going to have Muwonge Francis after that. So can we have, this is Ron, please, unmute. And whoever wants to speak, kindly send in your request and then we'll continue.
Hello, Juliani.
Yes, hi.
I'm Ronnie from Kenya. Mine is just to comment and to ask one question from David. And my comment is, I want to appreciate, I've been following the NUP, how they have been very vibrant to the government. Unlike Kenya here, where our opposition is dining with the government. And I want to congratulate the NP, the good work they have done despite the intimidation from the government. They have done a good job, and it's not like here in Kenya where we don't have a vibrant opposition, where government, whatever government wants to do, they will do it because they have a support from the opposition. And my question is, as NUP had a conversation to to find a way or to have a handshake with President Museveni, or have you attempt to have a reconciliation on how to come on how NUP and NRM, if they can come together? Have you have any attempt of those conversations emerge in your party? And that's what I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think you're asking about.
Great.
I think the question you're asking is about dialogue with the regime. And first of all, we have made it clear that we believe in dialogue 100%. We believe in talking for the sake of the country. It's not good to see where many countries are, because somehow people stuck to their guns, and then eventually you end up in a crisis. And everyone who studies Uganda can see that unless a miracle happens, we are headed for not very good times. And of course, we've seen these simmering tensions. We've seen, there's a lot of anger and frustration beneath the surface. So I think dialogue would be good for a country like Uganda. The challenge we have in Uganda is that General Museveni does not believe in dialogue. He believes in co-optation. And that's why we have said that, first of all, if you want to invite us to talk with you, first of all, it's free people who talk. Get your boot off my neck and let's talk as free citizens. You cannot say that, you have to come and talk to me by force. You don't talk to me. You, for example, so the money I've been talking about now, the money which is allocated through Parliament, General Museveni recently came out and said, you know what, parties which are not in iPod should not get this money. So he's, in other words, saying you must be in dialogue, you must be in iPod, which we believe is a tool for co-optation. iPod has been in Uganda for 10 years, but if you look at their record and what they've been able to achieve, I don't think there's much they have achieved in terms of dialogue. What Museveni believes is just co-optation. He co-opts people, he will give them positions in his regime, and then after some time drops them off, and the game continues that way. So for us, we've said that if we are to engage in dialogue, first of all, it should be with free citizens, free the political prisoners, stop harassing us, stop closing our offices, and then we can talk as a political party to a political party. Secondly, and very importantly, we have said that there should be a clear agenda. One of the biggest problems Uganda has is that from independence, we've not had a peaceful transition from one government to another. And we have said the critical issue in any dialogue with General Museveni should be about transition. How do we ensure that there's a peaceful transition from his regime to another government? So those are some of the issues that we're raising regarding dialogue.
Hello?
Yes,
Are you there?
Juliana, back to you, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to bring in Muwonge Francis. Just for those people who have sent requests, I can see them, but unfortunately I can't approve them. So either just say in a quick tweet, or sort of tag me and I'll bring you in, or simply raise your hand and I will invite you as a speaker. Would you like to unmute, Francis? Thanks.
Yes, good evening, everyone, and I hope everyone is okay. I want to appreciate the organizer of the conversation. It's a really very interesting conversation that every Ugandan would wish to engage in, and then add something on the way forward that and on the way forward and how best things can be done. Yes, a quick question here that I would wish to pass to the speaker of the day, and that is the permanent secretary of the National Unity Platform, Mr. David Muwonge. The issue of the accountability, most of the people who have been asking about accountability, they ask it in terms of resources and in terms of finances that you receive. How do you account for it? But my accountability is different because accountability is broad. Mr. David Muwonge, if you can be honest and sincere in this contest, how do you, as NUP, account for these hate speeches? Because they are hate speeches that are used by some people who are recognized as members of the party and those who claim to be party supporters, and as a party that believes in dialogue, as you said earlier on, and as a party that believes in peaceful transition. Don't you think because whenever someone says that does something wrong that is contrary to the law, that is contrary to the public expectation, some of the individuals who call themselves the NUP supporters, what they do, they come out with hate speeches and all the other type of abuse, which I think is not a solution to the question, but instead it worsens the situation, and again, it creates a lot of question that if these hate speeches are being said and those who are on the top do not come out to distance themselves or say this is bad and it shouldn't be done in the names of the NUP. Don't you think it creates a public question that what if the party that aspires to get power, NUP, when they get power, there will be more of autocratic and solve of not allowing people to speak. The other question is
sorry, Wenche, before you continue, could you be specific when you say hate speech? What exactly do you mean? Can you be clear?
Exactly what
I'm sure David can't account for what individuals say, but could you be specific in your example, please?
In my submission, yes. The one example I can give, I once looked at what happened in one of the barrios of the members of Parliament of NUP, when one of the coordinator of NUP in Masaka shifted sides from the NUP to the current ruling party, and the deputy spokesperson of the National Unity Platform, who is expected to be exemplary, the way he reacted, the way he was almost hijacking the guy and almost abusing him, how he has, it is understandable that possibly what he had done was wrong, but the way how he addressed, it looked to be inexperienced and not of a qualified leader. It's what I'm trying to mean. And I did not look at, because when you look at the principle of the NUP and the Honorable Davis Muwonge, they are people I respect, because I've not seen the principle of NUP coming out to behave like that way. He's a person I respect, because even when the situation is not the one that he likes or that is not in his favor, he controls his temper, and he will address a question in a diplomatic way, and as a person who needs a peaceful way. But for the case of the people who are just around, who claim to be party members, I've given you an example of the deputy spokesperson to the party and how he addressed that concern. Really, it looks inexperienced. Okay. But now, my question is
the second question.
My question, are there internal I would call them internal orientation of the party members on how they would address such question? The other question is the allegations that actually were passed on one of the media centers in our country here, that the constitution of the NUP, that it is almost like the constitution of the other party. They say that the president appoints the committee that appoints the members. The president has powers to stand for many times as he wants. I say the derogation because I'm not sure if it is true. So I would wish to get the clarity from the Honorable Davis Muwonge if true the constitution is as empowers the president to the climax as it is said in the one of the media houses here, or it is not. And if it is so, are there constitutional arrangements that are organized in the party to, first of all, tame the powers of the president? Because one of the reasons, as you've been hearing the question when we're discussing the question of Uganda, we discuss one specific person, and that's because the constitution empowers that specific person. So if there is a certain group that looks for power and they also have the same constitution, one would ask if there are ways to reduce that. But my last question is the journey to rescue people who are in prisons. I mean the political prisoner. If the constitution means have been taken and there is no yields, there's no yields and
Okay. Francis, I think we need to give David a chance to respond to your questions. So if you just, is there anything else you wanted to add? Because otherwise we sort of get caught up and we are restricted on time. So is there anything else you wanted to add, or can he now respond? Okay, voila. David, would you like to come in, please?
Well, I want to appreciate Comrade Muwonge for his question. One, we do not send people to abuse people. That's not our policy. Our values are well known: discipline, reliability, integrity, inclusiveness, fidelity, and service. That's what we believe in as a NUP. But what I want to say, and again, it's like you have your social media channel. I don't think whether you're an NRM supporter or FDC supporter or whatever, I don't think the party should be coming in to tell you what you should post on your page and what you should post. What we can do is generally speak to our, and as to whether they abide by them is another question. But we also know how the NRM operates. We have seen them, sponsor people to come up and, speak with so much venom about some issues in order to portray NUP as intolerant and that kind of thing. And of course, it has also gone physical. Every time there's a protest, They will come in with people, sometimes dress them in t-shirts of the opposition, and then somehow sort of claim that the opposition is violent in order for the regime to respond to them violently. Now, those are the initial categories of people I've talked about. But there's also another category of angry Ugandans. You know, I don't know if you really understand what it means to be under one ruler for 36 years now and counting. And every day, whatever goes on in this country, we know it. You know, the corruption, the misuse of the gun, the impunity. I always find it very contradictory that some people are so preoccupied with, the anger on social media as opposed to how the regime operates, the impunity with which the regime operates. If a regime can go in Kampala and shoot people and armed citizens and kill them, and someone does not criticize the regime for doing that, but instead is criticizing someone in NUP for responding, for insulting the person who has done that, I never seem to understand that. You know, it is like people who say, you know, NUP, you are intolerant, you're what, and somehow these people say they support NRM, and I'm like, yo, the person who you're defending killed or led to the murder of more than 500,000 people when he was coming here to take power, and then you're preoccupied with people who are on social media, you know. So I'm not trying to justify their conduct. Sometimes, of course, there are things I don't agree with. Like I've already talked about fake lists, for example, people are creating about the members of parliament and all that kind of thing. You know, we are in the age of social media, and all these are things that come with it. But what I want to emphasize is that NUP is a non-violent movement, and I expect citizens to be mostly targeting the regime for its excesses, for its impunity, etc., etc. Finally, you asked about the constitution of NUP. We have made it clear that we inherited a constitution of 2004, which is not entirely democratic. Of course, I think there is some bit of dishonesty. I know of no no constitution of any party in Uganda, or even in many places actually, which has term limits for a president of a political party. I don't know. I have not seen many, constitutions outside Uganda, but at least I can say on record that in Ugandan constitutions of political parties, I have not seen these term limits. So, but we are under a process of reviewing our constitution to bring it up to speed with the current realities, because these are not constitution, the dynamics of the time. A constitution of a party which had very few members cannot compare to one of millions of members now that we are. So we are trying to bring our constitution to be more accommodative, more democratic, etc. But I must add that while we are doing that, we also need to understand the kind of environment under which we operate. You somehow don't think that you're living under a democratic government where you have political parties free to conduct their business. You've seen what happens in with this when there is a delegates conference of a political party. The NRM will not be shy to even admit that they are sponsoring a candidate of a political party to win in an opposition political party, so that using that person they can either take control of the party or etc. So we need, even as we amend our constitution, these are some of the realities or the dynamics on ground that we must think about. And this is why I always encourage our brothers and sisters in the diaspora to always have the context of Uganda, that when you're making suggestions, please understand the context of Uganda. We all believe, I studied constitutional law, I believe in constitutionalism, and the situation where wants to use everything at their disposal to destroy a political party. And many times they work through your own structures, your own, and we have examples of all these political parties. Even this last scenario of the MPs is definitely an attempt by the regime to do something like that. So let's always have that at the back of our minds when we're discussing this. I thank you.
Thank you, David. Mayanja, I'm going to let you do the approvals because I can't seem to see them. Neither of us can actually see your request, so I don't know what's happening with that. There's obviously a glitch. Somebody's messing. Yabumbum, would you like to ask your questions? If we can be brief, that way we can try again. So for those people who make the requests, perhaps cancel them and make the requests again. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Just a bit of advice. If anyone wants to submit they want to ask a question or whatever, they can just raise their hands within the listeners, and then I could just invite them in. I think that would be a better way, because I can't see the requests as well.
Okay, no problem. So raise your hands, guys, and you'll be brought in. The Boom Boom, if we can make these really brief, because we do have a time constraint, and I would like to get in as many questions as possible. So I'm literally going to give a minute to everybody to allow David to answer as many questions as possible. Thank you. Your Boom Boom, and then Roland, and then Duke.
Okay, thank you so much, Juliana, for the chance. Yeah, I will actually be brief. My question, I think, is one. Yes, Mr. David, you're welcome to the space. So I'm glad that I found you here. Now, my question is that NUP, we have seen that it is being affected by very many challenges, left, right, and center, from the government, from the people who have been sent to spy, and very many people are attacking NUP. And we see that in some way or the other, there's a way the vibe is being killed. It's not the same vibe as we had the other time. So it's like as if for me, I've actually even lost track. I don't know exactly. Can you please tell us the direction? Because it's like as if slowly I'm losing the direction. I don't know what is next. Can you please brief us what's next? What's going to be done? Because it's like as if there is some bit of silence when we hear things like corruption by the MPs. We really worry. I don't know what's the plan like and what's the direction. Can you please guide? Thank you.
I really thank you so much for a very honest question. And I think, I don't know if you watched or listened to the president's speech in Senegal, and I think something he was addressing. I think, first of all, fighting a dictatorship is not a walk in the park. What gives me the courage and the confidence to go on is that, regardless of how manipulative, oppressive regimes are, they normally come tumbling down. They normally fall. And, I think one of the things that will encourage you to keep moving is to read about these other dictatorships or movements everywhere that eventually succeeded. Even when we are fighting against Museveni, just look at him in the bush. He made an attempt, even before the Bush War, he made an attempt in 1972. They came here with, of course, other forces, fight Idi Amin. He defeated them, and then they went back. And it took, another 6 years almost of waiting, reorganizing, and then came back. So I'm not suggesting that we are looking at spending a lot of time, but we need to ready our minds and ourselves to understand that fighting a dictatorship is a marathon. It may not be a sprint, but it's constant. I'm encouraged by the people of Sudan who were able to get rid of Bashir. If you look at the attempts that had been there before to get rid of him, there were so many. And somehow, after he fell, there was an article which, called him Sudan's master manipulator falls. And so he was a manipulator, maybe even better than Museveni, but eventually he failed. So I think the critical thing for us is to continue doing what we're doing, continue engaging. Of course, like a party, I already talked about one of the things we've been doing this year, especially we've mostly focused on welfare, on getting our people out of prisons, on, many of these people were new in TICS. They were just excited young people who did not even think that a regime would just open fire and start killing random people. I was at office 2 days ago, and a man came with a picture of his son who was shot dead in town. This young man was a mechanic. He was under a car trying to fix a car, and these guys came and shot him dead. So this is what we've been dealing with this year, trying to reorganize, re-strategize. But I think we should not give up. Let's continue doing whatever we can. Those who can organize protests should go on and organize them. Those who can, continue making appeals on social media, those who can continue mobilizing, speaking out, everything that we can do, I think we should. As regards the corruption and everything, this is how regimes of this nature work. And when I talked about Bashir being a master manipulator, these are some of the tricks they use to discourage people, because their intention is to show that there's no difference between NRM and these people who are claiming to fight for you, quote unquote. They want to, put the citizens in a situation of hopelessness. And if we give that to them, they will have achieved what they want. But I think our stand should be that even if 100% of the members of parliament or the NUP councillors or whatever, even if all of them were bought off, the citizens of Uganda still have a cause to fight. Our president himself has said that even if he himself sells out on the struggle, that will not put an end to the struggle, because the struggle is until we reach what we call a new Uganda. And it's until that time that we can be able to, that we have achieved our victory.
Thank you, David. I'm only going to take a few more questions and then we'll have to close it up.
Yes.
Hello, Duke.
Yeah.
Roland is going to come in first, and then it's Duke and then Frederick. And perhaps one last question from Mayanja, and then we will close it up. Completely be brief. 1 minute, really 1 minute to just allow David. Could you kindly mute Duke,
are you getting
and
me?
let Roland speak? Yes, we can hear you, Roland. Would you like to unmute and ask your question, please?
Are you getting me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you
briefly.
so much, and
Thank you.
I want to thank Muwonge for getting time to respond to some of the issues that are within us. However, I also want to commend them for whatever they do. However, we have seen instances where we see they also fail to distance themselves from issues that they always condemn and try to, show Ugandans that are really bad, that at times bring doubt within the supporters. For instance, a case in point is just of recent, when the principal of NUP was seen last election that was held in Omoro, in campaigning in the car of the leader of leader of opposition. So that alone shows a very bad image. I wish they can keep on ironing.
Sorry to interject. What do you mean he was seen? Perhaps, David, do you follow? I don't understand.
I'm hearing, but I cannot follow. The principal was never seen campaigning. You mean Omoro? He was never seen campaigning in the car of that's different.
Could you kindly ask your question? I understand you'd like to make a comment, but rather than make a judgment, would you like to make it a question, straightforward questions that can be responded to? Please, Roland. Thank you.
As in, I was trying to mean that there are some events where we see that some of the NUP people act exactly like what they condemn. So I was giving a case in point because we saw a picture of leader of opposition in the car of Loop. So that was my point. So I was saying if they can also try to show a
okay, Roland is muted. Okay, would you like to David? It's your floor.
Well, I didn't understand the question, but what I can say is that yes, he makes a valid point that we need to, live by the values which we profess. I don't know the kind of example he gave, but yeah, we constantly try to live up to these values. Of course, there are challenges along the way and everything, but the point you make is the principle you make is correct. But I think the example you've given is what I did not understand. But yes, the point you've made is acknowledged.
Thank you. Duke, would you like to come in, and then Frederick, and then Mayandra? And I think that's it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Iliana, and for this opportunity. And good evening to everyone. My question to the SG is that what is the party's position to those MPs who took the 40 million and never returned it as directed by the principal and the party? Thank you so much.
Well, I think I responded to that question already. The members of parliament, first of all, we have a challenge with this case. One, previously they would give money on accounts, bank accounts of members of parliament, so it was easy. This time it's difficult because these people were being given cash. And like I said, none of those lists I've seen online is right, because apart from a few members who told us, actually, this money was being given out and maybe it was being clustered as such and such, it's difficult to know who took this money and who did not. The good thing is that some of those who told us they had taken it have already returned it. So it's a bit difficult to know who took it, who did not take it. And but the principle is that if we find out that a member took this money and did not return it, we are going to have definitely a follow-up meeting. And I also want to say that it was just not a directive from the principal. It was a resolution of the caucus. We had a meeting with the caucus members, and had a frank discussion with the members, and we asked them who at this point thinks this money was moral, who thinks it was immoral, and everyone in the room said, acknowledged that this money was immoral, it was illegal, it was not, and so we are still studying this issue, and we'll take a decision based on how on the information that will be available.
Thank you. Frederick, would you like to unmute and ask your question, please?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me, everyone?
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mr. Secretary General. My name is Frederick Yakatonda from Rengo, Masaka area. My question is, Honorable Secretary General, how are we going to expand our party structures? Okay, how are we going to expand our party beyond our current area that we actually occupy politically? When I say that, I mean there are areas where we've got a bigger support, and there are areas where we are still lagging behind. And as it looks, since we much of concentrating in areas where we are very strong. So my question is, how are we expanding to areas that we never performed very well? Because it's a bigger question in a wider view that if you performed well in the central, then how do we expand that support to the western, to the southwestern, like in Kisoro, in Ruguri, in Kanu, where we didn't really perform very well? Because if we were to take power as NUP, we've got to expand our support beyond where we are now. And secondly, what are the resources that as a party is putting on table to support the upcoming leaders that are building structures on ground? They are those people that really want change. They are enthusiastic about it. They are stronger. They are willing to grow the party beyond, but the resources are limited. What is the party position on supporting such people to get the party moving? Thank you. That was my questions. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, comrade from Luengo. Yeah, you're still speaking, Juliana, or can I respond?
You can respond, sir.
Please go ahead and respond.
All right. So I thank you so much for your questions. First of all, I want to disagree with you that NUP did not perform well in other places. Those who observed the election actually know that NUP had support across the country, but I think the regime found it a little bit harder. Being smart as they are, they found it a bit harder to do the kind of chaos they did in other parts of the country. And they concentrated in northern Uganda and western Uganda to do the kind of rigging they did. You saw the videos, ticking for people, deploying the military, and in places like Kazo, Chiruhura, and other places, people would come and they would be told that you are only voting for the MP because the president, that one we have already voted. And there are testimonies of people who are saying that. So it's not that we did not perform well, or we did not have the capacity to perform well in other regions, in the Far East, the kind of chaos that was there. So that is the regime, I think, was deliberate to say, because especially the more cameras are there, the political dynamics, people are more alert and more conscious and more active. So the regime decided to do that. And if you want to know that the regime actually has no strength, see what they did in Omoro. We were just in Omoro a few days back, and you saw the kind of rigging they did, which most of which was covered on camera. The RDCs moving around with predict ballot papers and all that. And you would expect that if they say they have support in northern Uganda, they did not need to do all that, but they did that because they know that they do not have support. But I also hear you to say, how do we raise a consciousness, the same consciousness, which is, for example, here in Buganda, in Central Region? How can we transfer that everywhere across the country? And what I can say is that, yes, we are doing deliberate efforts. You've seen the Kunga campaign, for example. That Kunga campaign is all across the country. We're having committees at the district level, 15 people, mobilization committees at the constituency level, 15 people, and other structures that we're trying to build right from the grassroots. It's something that we're trying to do. Although I want to say that in a dictatorship, it is not the super magic, because as you know, the regime, you set up structures today, tomorrow they go either intimidating them or trying to buy them off. I saw what happened in Omoro. We had identified local polling agents, and I think 80% of them did not turn up. Some were arrested, others were given money, and others were picked up from polling stations on that very day of voting. So there are all these challenges, but we're doing our best. And I want to say again that this shouldn't be about the secretariat alone. should be about all of us. For example, you're calling in from Luengo. What are you doing yourself to make sure that you support the efforts, that you talk to the young people in Luengo to make sure that they are also alert, that sometimes you organize and go to Kanungu, because sometimes we will be short on human resource and we will be busy. Our attention is on so many things, but I think we need as many volunteers as possible to help with these efforts. And that reminded me of what Comrade Peter Ekakoro asked initially that I didn't respond to about regional offices. NUP is doing its best to establish these regional offices. So far, I'm sure you've been seeing pictures. We have an office in, apart from the central office, we have an office in Barara now. We have an office in Kasese. We have an office in Lango sub-region, that's in Lida. We have an office in Mbale for Bugisu. We have an office in Busia for Bukedi. We have an office in Soroti for Teso. So we're going around, and in the coming days we'll have an office in Arua for West Nile. So our plan is to have offices as coordination points within those regions.
Just a second, Mrs. Julian. Just a second.
It's Juliana.
Yeah.
Yes, what is it? Could you be brief?
Just 1 second, just 1 second.
Please go ahead.
Okay, Honorable Secretary General, like for me who is in Rengo, I'm actually doing much because I've worked with the current NUP leader that is taking us through, and we're establishing groups of 10 members on every village in our constituency, Koto Midwest, Koto South. I'm actually doing the best. And on that submission, what I wanted to make you understand is, yes, during the campaigns, I moved a lot in Sinjiro where I saw the things happening, where Honorable Ramirama was moving around with the trucks of soldiers and were taking away the ballots. I saw them with naked eyes. However, that civic competence we have in Buganda, my question was, how do we really transfer it to the deepest part of the country that everyone gets to understand that it is about them, it is about their change, it is their change, not for Mr. Chagulanyi or any other, it is their change. Actually, that is my major interest on how we get to that deeper area of Uganda, regardless of what is happening. Thank you.
I will request you to get time one of these office, and we have a discussion about this, and maybe pick your thoughts as well, because there are some discussions we definitely cannot have on a platform like. But what we can do so far, let's do using radio stations, social media, and other means of communication. These are our people. But I would invite you to also come and maybe we discuss a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. One last question, Michael. Make it very, very brief. My Anton needs to come in, and then David has to run. Yeah, be brief, please.
Thank you, Rihanna, and thank you everybody who is listening in here, and everybody who is making submissions here. I am one of the people who, majority of the people, or majority of Ugandans who believe that we won elections, but we won elections, and I believe that Ugandans all over the country are very active in this struggle. My worry or my concern is looking at the current elections in Kayunga and the northern region, in is it Omoro? We believe that NUP won elections in those regions. Now, the question is, what are we going to do for the 2026 elections? Because if we believe that we have support all over the country, if we believe that we win all these elections and the regime continue to rig these elections, how confident are we for the 2026 elections? Thank you.
Well, it's a very good question, but also a question that I would pose to you and to everybody else on this platform. It's a tough question that we keep asking ourselves. You know, it's about the people, and I think what we've been talking about is re-energizing our people under the People Power umbrella, the People Power platform, to say that everybody in Uganda needs to understand that, you know, it is their duty to fight for their country. It is their duty to rise up and defend their rights, and you know, ensure that their vote counts, ensure that their voice matters, etc, etc. I was in Kayunga. I saw what happened. We won the election, and we have the DR forms. We won with over 15,000 votes, and the Electoral Commission decided to announce the NRM candidate as winner. I was in Omoro, and in Omoro they changed the approach. They decided that You know, they were going to deploy cars without number plates to move around, delivering critique ballot papers. And of course, they arrested over 60 of our polling agents out of 84 polling stations. So that enabled them to do whatever they wanted to do. But I think also we need to understand that, and this is a debate we've been having, the regime really wants us to give up on elections. You can see clearly. They want us to give up on elections. They want to make citizens give up on elections. And maybe they think if we resort to other means, that's their specialty. Then they will know how to deal with us. But I think the people of Uganda should not give up on engaging in these elections. Because for us, when we look at elections, we see them as an opportunity to realize our people. You know, before the elections in 2021, the Honorable Chagulanyi had been blocked from performing, from attending church services, from attending weddings all across the country. He would step here and then he would be blocked and that kind of thing. But the election campaign, as violent as it was, gave us an opportunity to go around the country, mobilizing the people, taking change, because you never know what will happen. Like I said, a struggle against the dictatorship is continuous. And no one, not even the regime, sometimes not even us ourselves who are fighting on this side, can clearly tell what the spark will be. But so you continue, you know, doing everything that you can do. I think one of our elders related struggle against dictatorship to someone who wakes up looking for money in Kampala. And he said that, you know, you wake up every day, you go to Chikugo, look for money. If you don't get money today, you return home. The following day, you'll be on the same road going to Kampala, to downtown, again to look for money. Eventually, you'll get what you're looking for. So it's a continuous process, a continuous struggle. And we see elections as one of the tactics that you can use. But there are other many tactics that you can use, including protests and other forms of peaceful or non-violent methods.
David, have you got a few more minutes? Just a few more? How are you for time?
You had talked about Mayanja asking a question, and then
because I've had only men, I wanted a woman to come in.
Sure, let's have a woman, please.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Jackie or Lawyer to come in, because I tend there's an overwhelming the gender balance just didn't seem to work out, and I've got no idea why. But Jackie, please unmute, and if you can briefly ask a question.
Juliana. Thanks a lot. And I text you the question, but I realized you did not read it, and I really wanted to ask SG. Thank you for bringing David here, and for all this great talk. I've listened from the very beginning to now, till now, and he's performed greatly. I would like to thank him also for answering all the questions posed to him. My question to Davis is, I am a medical person, and in my medical ethics, life comes first. Now, Davis, we have a situation at hand that came in the media about one of your legislators. I think she falls under NUP, that is Bachireke Namboze, who is ill at the moment, and she is supposed to be flown abroad for treatment. My question is, what is the position of NUP on this flying abroad? A policy they have detested and protested against in the past. Because if we have to correct things, then we don't have to. Juliana always says it doesn't matter even if it is your mother doing something that is that facilitates the dictatorship, then you shouldn't do it. In this case, it is in your house as a NUP. What is your plan? Life comes first. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the question, Jackie. I'm really grateful for that question. First of all, I must admit that I've not had a chat with Honorable Namboze. I've been seeing media reports that she's going to be paid for. When we went to see her with the president, our question was that they had not given her clearance. The medical board had not given her clearance to travel for treatment. Let me just make one thing clear. The protests in Seattle, I think that's what has been largely referred to. And unfortunately, some people fell in for the propaganda of the regime. I think the question, people are protesting about the failure of the regime to build hospitals in Uganda. I think that's what it was about. People are not saying that, you know, public officials cannot, under the present circumstances, go for treatment abroad. We have seen many people, you know, go to Aga Khan. In NUP, recently we sent Atiku Shaban, was brutalized in 2018 to Aga Khan because his condition could not be handled here in Uganda. we went to all hospitals until the time when the doctors recommended that the only doctor who could see him is in Nairobi, and we had to send him there. So I think the protests, which were not organized by NUP per se, but which were organized by Ugandans, I believe, falling in different political parties in the US, I think the message they were sending is, regime, invest in healthcare back home. For example, we've just talked about the money that these members of parliament are sharing, which Anita Among was giving out. And we've talked about 20.4 billion shillings. Tell me how that money, what a miracle that money can do to Mulago Hospital, to make sure that it is, uplifted, to make sure that people don't have to travel, from Bundibujo to Kampala to have access to certain facilities, when actually the hospital in, whether in Kasese or in Bundibujo itself, can be uplifted. So I think the position or the question about those protests, the critical thing was, can we invest in healthcare in Uganda? Yes, the stars might have, in some cases, used language which some people found inappropriate, saying go back home and all that kind of thing. But I think the central question in that protest was, why doesn't the regime invest in healthcare? Because we have the money. If the money was not just, I want you to look at the recent supplementary budget that was passed through Parliament, out of which this 20-point-something billion was picked. Just look at that budget, the supplementary budget, the money that was going to set out Operation Shuja and whatever. It's just ridiculous. That's why NUP, the two areas we want to focus on is education and healthcare. So I want to say that NUP does not say, it has not said that a person under the present circumstances cannot be flown outside for treatment. Not at all.
Yeah. David, would it not, the idea of leading by example and perhaps showing some kind of faith in the Ugandan medical practitioners, would it not help in promoting local health practitioners if we limited or even you stopped many of the politicians within the opposition being flown abroad, because it sort of doesn't set them apart from Museveni. It's really good that you're promoting health, but it also how the impression it gives is a lack of faith in our local practitioners. It's also a continuation of what Museveni has been doing. They cough and they fly them, they're flown to Germany. And for me, and I think for some Ugandans, it's about practice, start as you mean to continue. And of course, I'm not in that position, and I speak as somebody from a very privileged position where I have access to medical care, but thousands and millions of Ugandans don't get the opportunity to go abroad, and like the members of parliament. And it's more using taxpayers' money to treat a very privileged select number of people to be flown abroad, regardless of their political colors. That, I think, is what really irks a lot of Ugandans. That if me in Budzu or my judger in Budzu cannot access this healthcare, why is any member of parliament, regardless of their entitlement, are they being flown abroad?
Okay, I think I see your question. So your question is mostly about using taxpayers' money to fly them out for treatment. Honestly, this is something that we think should come to an end. And like I said, that was what the process was about. Why is it that why don't we invest this money in uplifting the healthcare of the millions of Ugandans, as opposed to a few individuals being entitled to fly abroad for treatment? Now, like I said, I've not really spoken to the Honorable Namuzi about this. It's something that I can do and try to find out the dynamics. You remember, for me, when I met with her at hospital, one of the things you need to know is that all her problems emanate from the challenge she got in Parliament when she was battered in 2018. And for the time, her health has not been the same. And I think what she explained to us at the time was that she was really, really fighting with the medical board to give her clearance. So I don't have all the details about this, but in principle, yes, we are saying that a time has to come where Ugandan hospitals are uplifted. I don't think, of course, some people might be doing it out of other consideration, but I don't think the members of parliament. You remember when our president was beaten up in Arua? You know, very few people had chance to see him, and I was one of those who saw him at marking the military barracks. And I don't know if what the reaction would have been if people. So he got out of that place, and he everybody here because and the state, no one paid for him. He had to put his own bills to go to the US for that for the everything. But as you know, he injected with all sorts of substances in military detention, so he couldn't stay here to say, let me somehow on the hospitals here or something like that, because first of all, he needed to check the toxins and everything. So there are all these other considerations which people have for going abroad. But I think the central question what you're asking is about using taxpayers' money to fund these kinds of things. And of course, like I said, we would definitely not do that kind of policy.
Absolutely. I think private funding, I think if you're being paid a salary as an MP or anybody, I have no problems, or I see no problems with somebody using their private means to get medical attention, because you would do it anyway. Health is such a premium. So you would do it anyway. So I see no problem in principle with somebody paying privately. It's like I said, and like you've just pointed out, it's the taxpayer money that's becomes a problem. Mayandra, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Please, give me one more minute, please.
Okay.
Please. Thank you very much. And Davis, thank you for your answer. Fair enough. I wonder why NUP did not come publicly to change the narrative of what happened in the USA when the late speaker was there. Secondly, in the NUP, from Acholi sub-region, we have a chairperson of a committee, local government. Then we have the deputy chair of COSASE, who is from Amuru, the Honorable Lucy Akelo. Now, in somewhere, as you were speaking, you talk about the case that about injustices that NUP has lodged in the ICC. Now, from the constituency of Honorable Lucy Akelo, there's been gross injustices and murder and torture and everything in their land conflict. So my question to you as a lawyer and also from the NUP and also the opposition in Uganda, have you taken interest to include this case among the case scenarios that you have lodged at the ICC? Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. First of all, I think we came out a number of times to explain what the protests in the US were about. We clearly said it was never about the late Right Honorable Speaker. It was a principle. The people were protesting, as far as I know, and like I said, that protest was not organized by NUP. It was citizens saying, let's spend money on healthcare in Uganda. If you go to Nairobi, you'll see doctors in Nairobi Hospital, in Aga Khan, wherever, because there's no equipment in Uganda, they are not paid well, they don't even have accommodation and other amenities. So then they decide to go for greener pastures. If you go to Boston and see the people who work, the nurses there, and even some doctors, they are Ugandan. So it's a question of brain drain, and we think that if we invested money in healthcare, those individuals would be able to come back to Uganda, would be able to treat and take care of people in a more dignified. So I think that was and that continues to be our narrative. Now about the ICC case, thank you so much for raising the question. And if you see, our president talked about it in the past, and we've been following it up. The injustices going on there, and now even at another level, with murders, rapes of women, and other things. One of the challenges is that place is extremely, there's a lot of security there, and I know that at some point we even tried to go there ourselves, and we were advised not, because of the way the regime had really security presence everywhere. But it is something we can discuss, because definitely crimes against humanity are broad, and they don't just relate to the political situation. We have the situation in Kasese and other places across the country. So thank you so much for raising it again. It is something we can discuss even privately to see how we can get lawyers there, because the most important thing is have lawyers there, have them take affidavits, get the evidence of these people, and then file it with the court, so that the court can decide whether these cases merit investigation, which we think they definitely do.
Thank you, David. Finally, Mayandra, and then we'll call it an evening.
Yeah,
Thank
sorry,
you.
sorry. Okay, thank you very much, Iliana. Thank you very much, Mr. Muwonge. My quick question is, what is the NUP's position on issues that are happening outside Uganda, but closely interlinked with the country? For example, the issues that are happening in the DRC with Operation Shuja and all this other stuff that is, literally happening. I think there's a report that came out recently by, I've forgotten, but I'll send you a link, by a certain think tank or research firm that analyzed Operation Shuja, that showed that, it's not achieving the said objectives and things of that sort. So I want to know, I want to understand the position of the party on the issues that are happening in the DRC. Then secondly, what is the political significance of the engagements and interactions that the president is having all over the continent as well as internationally? We've seen him travel to Senegal, we've seen him travel to different parts of Africa, as well as traveling to I think he's in Germany now. What is the political significance? Are these people playing us, or are they, are we getting something out of these engagements? Because the reason I ask this is that I think 2 months ago, there is a committee from the US Human Rights something that came and met the opposition leader at the parliament. But then all of a sudden, I don't know what came out of that particular engagement, but, we want to understand if at all, ever since those people from the US came to visit the opposition leader of parliament, if there is anything fruitful that has come out of it, or should Ugandans not pay much attention to that and just concentrate on, doing what we do best, or not to look forward to people coming from outside to give us a hand? But I would like to know generally the foreign
Mayandra,
yeah.
I think you must have come in late, because that was one of the first questions. But I'm going to let
I must have come in late.
Respond briefly. I'm going to let him speak.
No, yeah, no problem. If you responded it, I'll just hear a replay. No problem.
Okay. No, but I'll let him speak.
Well, I wanted to say the same thing that I responded to both questions actually at the start, regarding Congo, the question about the Congo. It's interesting what the story of Congo is extremely sad, as it knows. But from the time the Operation Shuja started, we came out clearly and did not approve of it, because it came at the heels of Uganda's condemnation by the International Court of Justice. We have to pay lots and lots of money because of adventurism went in Congo, and a few of people plundered judgment, even has some of the names of the people who went in and plundered timber, gold, all these other things, and yet the people of Uganda have to pay this money for many years. We disagree with that approach of the regime going into the Congo, to do pretty much what we regard the same things. And of course, there are videos which came out showing our soldiers beheading people, and when the operation had just started, and the human rights record of Uganda is not anything to go by. You know what they are going to be doing to the people in the Congo. So definitely we were not in agreement. But also, just like in the 90s, when Uganda went into Congo with all these claims of we are going in for strategic security interests and all that, but it turned out that they are going to plunder. So I personally do not buy into what the narrative of the regime and the NUP has come out clearly say, that this is not even about pursuing ADF by maybe some sort of self-aggrandizement, but also General Museveni continuously portraying himself as a guarantor of peace and stability in the Great Lakes region, as indispensable to the international community and all that. Maybe to your last question, you asked about how we view the engagements that we continue to have. I'll say that there have been fruits out of these engagements. The struggle is multi-pronged, as we all know. So you never know. You just continue knocking on doors, you continue your voice, continue to speaking out to governments, to activists all across, and who knows? For example, that out of these engagements, and of course the efforts of other people, I see Nicholas Opio listening in, people like Nicholas and other people have roles and significant roles. We've been able to get some sanctions against individuals, travel bans, etc. Previously, there was a lot of money going directly to the government of Uganda. Now, many of these countries do not give money directly to Uganda. They give it to, indirectly, they send it to NGOs and other, organizations, which then goes directly to serve the interests of the people. So we continue to make this case. And so we haven't gotten what we want exactly, because we think there should be stronger sanctions. We think the Magnitsky Act or Magnitsky sanctions should be imposed on these officials of government who violate democracy and violate human rights and rig elections, etc., etc. But it's a continuous process of engaging and trying to get as many people to see what exactly is happening in Uganda.
Thank you, David. This has been such an enlightening exchange. I see loads of people who have been desperately trying to come in and speak. I've got, I don't know, we're about to close, but there's Daniel Kawuma who's waiting, or who's wanting to ask you a question, but I think we've run out of time. It's entirely up to you. And then we can close. It's up to you.
Let him ask his question, Comrade Daniel. Let him please ask his question.
Okay, there we go. Daniel, would you like to come in and ask your question, please? Oh, he's dropped again. I've just, he should,
good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for organizing this discussion and for all the answers to the questions. I don't know if David will be able to answer this question, but we have seen opposition over the years believe in election in Uganda as a means for bringing about meaningful change. And I know they have continued to encourage people to participate in voting and going on to pick representatives at all levels of government. But for me, this is a strategic question going forward. Is NUP willing to step back into presidential elections with Museveni? Because I don't know if the question which I think the opposition at some point has to answer, because Besigye tried, and we saw the challenges we faced. Bobby Wine also came and tried and energized the youth in Uganda. People knocked on doors, and there was a lot of energy across the country, but we saw what happened. So the question that I think this is a question for all of us. Now, of course, no one is advocating for violence or anything that should be the course of action, the way NRM came into power. No one is advocating for that, but just as an opposition, I think that's a question which has to be answered. That, let's say in 2026, is Bobby Wine going to stand again? Of course, I don't expect an answer to that question now, but it's a question which opposition has to grapple with. That, is the vote still seen as a viable way to have meaningful power change in Uganda? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think you've done very well to ask that question to all of us. I think it's an extremely important question. You ask yourself what you need to do, because in a way, sometimes the regimes organize these elections to legitimize themselves and to do whatever they want. But like I explained again earlier, that for me, from what I saw in Omoro and what I saw in Kayunga, the regime seems to be desperately trying to get us to that point where people say no more to elections. And I think if that consideration is made at a time and we decide that we're not going to participate in these elections, then we should ask ourselves, what is the alternative? Definitely, that's not a discussion we can have here, but I can confirm to you that these are questions we keep asking ourselves. You go to Kayunga, you win elections, and you have all the DR forms. The regime announces whoever they want. You go to Omoro, and then people are moving around in numberless cars, delivering pre-ticked ballot papers, and then they just come up and announce whatever they want. Then you ask yourself, is it worth it to engage in these elections? But like I said, on one hand, we use these elections to mobilize our people, to reach out to areas where we would otherwise not reach, to pass on a message of change. But like I said, it is a question that we need to have. And personally, I think Ugandans, and when you say opposition, I expected a question to come up around that question of opposition unity, because it is a question people keep asking. And General Museveni, being the manipulator he is, has largely been able to divide the opposition, that sometimes you try to look through and you're like, who are we going to even engage with? But I think it's important for the forces of change, let me call it that, to come together and have a discussion on that. And what I can say is that we are continuing to engage with our brothers and sisters in other forces to have these open discussions about questions like this.
Thank you so much, David. There's so many people wanted to talk to you. I have to apologize and to let people know that NUP will be holding spaces moving forward. So there will be dialogue, but I'm sure David can tell you more all about that. But this is not the end. It's been really a really fruitful and rewarding exchange as an inaugural Twitter space for NUP. So thank you so much for taking the trouble to come in and so graciously answering everybody's questions. I'm going to leave the last word to you and wish everybody a very safe and excellent week ahead. David, would you like to come in with some closing words and then we'll wrap it up?
I want to really, really appreciate you for hosting us here today, and to appreciate you so much, for giving everybody a platform to, ask questions. Like I said, we really, really want to start making use of these spaces, not only to answer questions, but to listen to what our people are saying, to listen to what, to get some ideas. Like now, some of the ideas I've picked from this conversation. So thank you so much. And finally, I want to request and to encourage everybody to remain optimistic. There are many times when it looks bleak, there's many times when the future looks dark. But like I said, I'm always encouraged by the resilience of people in different places who have been able to win their struggles. I want to appreciate the diaspora and everybody who continues to do whatever they can do to push change in our country. This is about NUP. This is not about Honorable Chagulanyi. This is about our country. And so let's all get our hands dirty to see that our country changes and gets on the right path. Thank you so much. And like I said, very soon we'll have another space where hopefully we'll have more leaders, including our president, listening from the people and also speaking to you all. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. Have an excellent week, everybody. And we will see you again next week at the same time. Stay safe. Thank you so much, David. And hope this dialogue absolutely continues. It's been